nice to see that we have people gathering. So we will start in 2 minutes. Welcome, you all. Just some more people are joining, which is nice. And then we will start. Okay. So today we will talk about innovation. I'm Ida.
I'm Helen.
Yes, and it is so we are so glad to see you all here. And innovation is quite a buzzword. Helen, what does it mean for you?
For me, innovation is something that if you have new ideas and if you manage to exploit those new ideas in a successful ways, then this could be considered as innovation.
Yes, exactly. For me also, what really got to me last year when I thought about innovation was that innovation doesn't have to be a product or a specific thing, but innovation can be anywhere. So if we talk about businesses, then it could be in business processes, it could be development processes, it could be the way you market things or the way you deliver things. So it could be anywhere. It doesn't have to be the outcome of your business, but it could be inside of your business as well.
I totally agree with this, yeah.
Yes. So now let's get into talking about what we want to share with you today. Just as a comment, if you have any questions, feel free to leave it in the chat, and in the end, we will gladly answer all the questions. And yeah, so I'm Ida, as I already mentioned. I'm the CEO of 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, and my passion is to create growth. Growth is my word. I like personal growth. For me, it is very important to learn new things and to do whatever I need to do to grow constantly. But I also like business growth and companies growth, and I like the growth in between, like the growth of the teams, the growth of employees, how they form the team and how they grow as persons as well. So in those different sides, I like this growth. And now a few words about 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 as well. In 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, we develop software, as simple as that. But our way of software development is starts before you know what you need exactly. We think along, like, how do you really do the product development so that you get maximum value out of it? That is our passion, and that is what makes our processes different. And that's why our customers, for example, are startups, growth companies, but also corporates who are implementing agile or trying to get more innovational. And when we come to this software development, then end users are really, really important when we build products. And this is why, even though we don't have a product of our own, we build the products for our customers, but still the end users of our customers are also someone we have very close connection. And on this map, you can see where our end users are located. So they are very global, and that's why we have to think globally as well. And maybe you read the description of this event. It had the word super agile in it. the word super agile is something we came up a year and a bit more ago. We came up with it when we felt that yes, we use agile, but we do a lot more, and we want to call that something as well. And then we started to use this word. I do a lot of super agile workshops as well. Today I will not get into too much detail, but just to give you a short overview of what it means. So naturally, super agile includes agile approach. It has the agile elements, but most of the world today is already using agile, so that is just something that is quite common already. But what we do is that we include more things to that. We have built processes and culture that also supports top-notch technology. It helps to build products that are easy to maintain, easy to grow. We have microservices, continuous deployment, all those things that help to bring this quick development into action. We also include growth hacking into our mindset and into our teamwork. Minimal time to market is something we always think, because a code that is written brings no value until it has reached end users. We will talk a lot about end users today, because end users is what matters when you build a product, whatever type of product. As well, we talk a lot about communication, because when you innovate and when you do build products, then communication is something that is there. But for us, it is in super agile environment, it is very important that there is direct communication, that developers speak with end users, developers speak directly to the business, because that's how developers understand what is really needed. And when developers do decisions, which they do every day about the product they build, then they know what value are they bringing, and they make better decisions. So that all brings us to this business mindset. And business mindset doesn't mean that product owners or business people have business mindset, but it means that every developer in a team has business mindset and knows why they are building what they build. In our teams, we do the super agile score. This is, again, I will not get into detail today, but this helps the teams to get the feeling how far they are, because we don't live in ideal world, or everything is not perfect. We have to figure out like how to get better and better. And this circle, this super agile score, helps us to pay attention to it. Like how far are we implementing continuous deployment? How far are we implementing microservices in this product development? How far are we with this short communication flow? How have we managed to implement growth hacking into development teams? How are we doing priority switching and all those things which are very important to build innovation, to build product are there, and then you can see it, and then it is easier to reach those goals. But now, getting a bit more in detail. I think most of you know that when you start to build a product, you will figure out what are the customer jobs you want to do, what are the pains and what are the gains. Those are like quite basic things where you start when you build a product. But for us, it is also important that every developer in a team is knowing those things, that it's not just the product owner who understands the end user very well, but it's also the developer in a team who has met the end user and who has tried to walk in their shoes. I have, for example, this picture you can see at the moment. It was taken last August when we were building an app for a startup who was trying to make it easier for hobby sportsmen to get together. And to try out this app, we just went hiking ourselves with this, using this app. And with that, we got so much more into the mindset. What does the user really feel? Also, we do team workshops with every development team about customer jobs. And by customer job, I don't mean system requirements which are needed, but I mean the things that the end user really has to do in their real life, like get to the work or buy food or whatever real action is behind it. You need to understand what it is, what are we fixing, what are we valuing. And now I will get again to this communication part. Communication is difficult. It's really hard. Yesterday, we had concise internal workshop where we were improving our skills of giving feedback, and I saw that even if you think about it, you say out things and the other person understands it completely differently. This is just the way communication is. But if you have this long communication flows, like developer speaks to the product owner speaks to a business owner, then the business owner maybe speaks with the end users, then you get so much lost in translation, because then the developer really doesn't get the feeling what they are doing. And when we talk about innovating and innovation, then the risks of doing the wrong thing or misunderstandings are even bigger, because we are doing something that we don't know yet exactly what to do and how to do it. Then this communication becomes even more important. And this is what we try to emphasize in our development process, to have this direct communication and understanding. And I can give you an example. For example, when you do something technically very well, you automate something. Everyone knows parking lots in department stores, they usually have gates or something. Let's say that we automate it. You don't need to do anything. You just drive there and you stop there, and that's it. The parking starts automatically, and it's innovation. It's good. It's great, but the customer doesn't understand it. They just drive to the parking lot and they are confused. Like, what do I need to do? And then maybe they spend time looking for how to park, and at the same time they actually already have the parking started. So it means that everything was done perfectly. Even the idea behind it was very well, but you didn't really sit in the shoes of the end user, and you didn't understand that they maybe needed this, but they didn't understand what was happening. And this is also part of development. You should think about those things, and you should bring this communication and clarity and anything else to this solution. Maybe in the parking app, you don't need to do anything, but you get a pop-up like, yeah, your parking started, whatever solution could be there. But you should think about those things when you do this product development. And this goes well with growth hacking. And growth hacking is what it basically means for me. I already mentioned that growth is my word, so I like growth hacking as well. What it means for me is that you bring marketing and data analysis and all this closer to development once again. So it is part of developing new products. It is all the processes drawn are quite similar. Helen will talk about design thinking later on, and the processes there, but it's all basically the same thing. In growth hacking, what is important for me is that idea generation. Idea generation is also done by everyone who is included in this product development. For example, the development team goes to the forest to walk and do brainstorming. What would they do differently in this project or product? And maybe it's about having the wall of ideas in your development room, because whenever you develop something, you get the ideas, but you are usually in a hurry and then you forget them. So it's important to write them down at that point and later on maybe come back to them. Of course, then you prioritize, then you run those things, but it's also important that you analyze the data later on. For example, what we have implemented in our development teams is that every developer knows later on, like, how was this new functionality used? And they know the business KPIs, they measure it, and they follow it and they get the feeling that yes, now I have done something. Now what I developed in code has actually helped someone. And maybe it doesn't help someone. Then you get the questions like, why didn't it work? What can we do differently? So this is why I like growth hacking. It's not about marketing, but it's about working together very closely. And a common mistake I have seen is that people often think that all this growth hacking and idea validating and all those things are for small startups. You do it when you start with your product. Incubators help you to do it. That's normal. But what we see is that it is just as important for large established companies, because even Facebook does it. It has millions of users, but at the same time, you still need to bring new value. Of course, maybe yes, it doesn't affect your revenue if you do a mistake more, or you can, when you spend money, then you will recover and it's okay. But why spend money on something that you don't need? Even if you are a big company with good big budgets, then you still want to do what matters. And so it's still important to bring in the innovation that is needed and that is important, and learn from it. So it is definitely for all kind of companies. And for me, the thing is that the traditional way is putting departments in different boxes, like here is marketing, here is development, here is something else, logistics, and so on. But it is important to lose those boxes, because the boxes slow down the innovation. It can work, of course. It has worked so far, and it will work in the future. But still, it slows the innovation that drives growth. And if you want to grow quickly, then you need cooperation, you need teamwork. You cannot have those boxes. And eliminating those boxes is quite a fun thing to do, especially in big companies. Growth for me is a lot connected with teamwork and success as well. Success is a team sport. Teamwork for me has always had a very special meaning. Teamwork is not about money, it's not about strategy or technology, it's not about the idea you have, but it's about how you work together to get the result. And for example, I have spoken with investors a lot who say that the first thing they look in a startup is teamwork. If you don't have people really working well together so that they will get more than they would individually, then it doesn't work out. You cannot do innovation like this. Teamwork is not people sitting in the same room. It's the synergy. It's how you get things working together. And this is why this teamwork and cooperation is so critical factor in innovation and also in effectiveness of your success building. 3 common mistakes I have seen, which I have already mentioned somewhat, is first of all, people are so sure that they know what people want. And whenever you talk to someone who is starting or building a startup, they know that they will build the best product. They know that it is needed, but this being too sure of it often gets them to the point where they build the wrong thing and they spend money on building something that is not needed. So you want to eliminate this failure possibilities, and you want to try out many things, but you want to understand as early as possible whether it is the right thing. And again, Helen will later on show some examples of how some companies have found solutions to those, but it is the thinking that doubt anything you are sure of, because you don't really know how the world is thinking and how others are thinking. And we talked about KPIs and measuring, but I have seen a lot that people forget to plan how to measure the results. It means that, yeah, you do the thing and then you think that, okay, I would now like to know this. But now I don't have data for that anymore. I should know ahead what I want to measure in the end. Well, it helps to keep the priorities, which gets to the third point, but it also gives you the possibility to actually measure in the end. The third point is in growth hacking, there's a term, Northern Star. Northern Star is your main KPI, something that is the most important for you at this exact moment. And it is not the same. It's so different for different companies. My favorite example is for everyone knows Facebook and LinkedIn. For example, no, Facebook and Airbnb. Facebook needs people to spend time in Facebook. What matters for them is that you scroll, you go back, you spend their hours and hours and hours. What matters for Airbnb is that you do the booking. Even if you go there for 1 minute, they need that you do the booking. And if you don't, then that's you are worthless for them. So you need to know what is important for you. What is it what you are aiming? And it is important for the development team to understand what is the main KPI at the moment. Is it to get new customers? Is it to engage the customers? Is it to get the customers to buy more maybe payable parts of the product or whatever else? You should understand what is the KPI, and then the teams who develop it should also always have this in mind. Then they know how to make the right decisions. We have talked about end users. We talk about how we try to test how it feels in their shoes, but it comes down to empathy, which also Helen will talk later on. So a lot of people, again, they draw the personas, they figure out the gender and maybe the age of the possible persona, but it is important to go deeper, like how does your end user think or feel or act, and that is what really matters. And as the last thing, I will give you something you can try out, something I like to do in workshops, is that once you have figured out what you want to innovate, what you want to do, it is also important to visualize, like, where do you want to be with this in a year? What would be life like? What would be the world like? What is it that you think and feel when it has come true, this innovation that you are doing? How it will affect, and what is it? What will be life next summer about? So once you visualize it, you know where you want to reach. Then before you go to action, it is also important to get rid of the blockers, meaning that you probably have some kind of habits or some kind of processes in your company that would not help to reach this goal, but they are actually blocking you or slowing you down. And understand what are those places that are blocking you from reaching this goal, and eliminate those. That helps you to then go to the action plan and then figure out what actions you need to do and how to reach that. I have a very special offer for you today. If you wish to have a personal innovation workshop with us, then we have a 2-hour workshop for only 95 euros. If you write to us before 25th of June and have the keyword super agile in the email, then you will get this special price. But now I would gladly let Helen to tell you more about design thinking.
Yes, thanks, Aira. So, so as I mentioned, my topic is going to be what are the methods how to stay curious about your end user, because there is actually a systematic way how to look at it. So I'm a service design and user experience specialist by title, but a little bit about me as well, as I've kindly introduced herself as well. So I like to say by the end of the day, I'm still a designer. So I come from the background of classical art, so meaning that I have drawn since get-go, basically. This is a drawing that I made at the age of 2. And supposedly, this is supposed to be a person, couldn't count too well. But in the later years, I still have drawn a lot of people. So kind of like this thread of humans, kind of like drawing humans or mapping them seems to be something that's already integrated. And today, most of my everyday work still finalizes with user interface, so kind of like design, if you will. But on top of that, I would like to say that I'm a designer who uses thinking patterns. So who tries to make sense of who does this design communicate to. So it's not designing for myself, but for the end users. So most of the work is actually using service design principles, empathy maps, customer journey maps, all sorts of things you can think of. So this is a little bit about myself. But now let's get to the good part, yeah? So one message that I really, really want to put out there is that the situation that's happening out there, the pandemic that's happening out there, is powering innovation today in a huge atypical scale. And if you have had kind of like some ideas you want to test with, then now is the time to be bold. Now is the time to put those ideas out there. And one interesting effect with this innovation is that we rarely actually notice it, because like if things are designed good, then we don't pay attention to it because it just works. It serves our purpose. So think of this. Each morning when you use a fork, or each day when you use a fork, how many times you think, oh, fork, this is a good invention, you know? So it's noticing things that are actually serving us as human beings. Now, a typical mistake that I see is that when I would ask, who is this guy? Most of you would say that probably he lives somewhere in the US, he has an Android, probably not pets, maybe drives a fancier car. For this girl, we would say that she works as a designer, one of the typical answers that I have heard. Quite young, I've heard that she lives in Sweden, somewhere in north of Europe. But the fact is, we don't know these people. So even if we have a vision of our personas, we need to make sure that they do what we presume that they do. And as I've mentioned multiple times before, it's not enough. We need to understand what they're thinking, what they're feeling. We need to emphasize with our end users. So for example, if I would ask you to think about the first red car that comes to mind, then most people would think about red Ferrari, right? But actually, what if your end users were thinking about this kind of car? So it's trying to understand them beyond the gender, beyond the sex, beyond what they do. And one thing that we tend to forget when we work with services and products is that we look at them without the people in the background. So we kind of go abstract with these things. But think of this, when you have your phone, when you have all of these apps and services, they're useless without the human in the background using those services. So it's all about putting the person, putting the human in the center of whatever we do. Because it really doesn't matter in what kind of sector you work with. It's anticipating what the end users might be wanting or needing. And here is a place where this nifty little tool comes to hand, which is called design thinking. So this is the most basic map of a design thinking, which is divided into steps of 6 and into phases of 3. So it's understanding, exploring, and then materializing what you're doing in these phases. Now I'm going to focus on the emphasize and the testing part, because I see this, as I mentioned before, I see this in big companies and I see this in startups. But that this is the parts where we tend to fail. We tend to forget the basic things that are being taught to us. And if we start with this emphasizing phase, now the important thing here is that it's combining the end user needs, it's combining the practicality of the ideas that we have, it's about cost efficiency, what makes sense, and it's about any kind of specific rules that are, or factors that are important for your project. And it's about coming up with as many ideas as much the team can think of. As I mentioned again before, it's all about the teamwork, not the people sitting in the same room, but the teamwork, everybody putting their ideas on the paper. Now, with the ideas is that if you emphasize with your end users, then it's not falling in love with the first idea that you're sure that this is going to work. It's about coming up with at least 10,001 ideas. And then what happens is that you find that this one idea was worth exploring, and this is what brings innovation. But the 10,000 others are the ways that you found that they don't work necessarily with the end user needs or the cost efficiency. And to put it on the simple terms, then TransferWise has illustrated this effect very well. So the more time you spend in this understanding phase, the emphasizing part, it actually brings down the product risk and the operational costs. Because think of this, if you're sure in the beginning what you do and if it makes sense, then you're actually bringing the risk down and the cost with it. Now, another map that is really useful is empathy map. So this is what we should do regardless, again, if it's a big company, if it's a small company, we need to understand what the end users think, say, feel, and do throughout the processes. So it's all about emphasizing. Now, let's look at the design thinking map again. So if we cover this understanding, we have these 10,000 ideas, then we define what are worth exploring more. Again, coming back to the cost efficiency, the practicality, all these things. We prototype. I'm not going to stop on this because this is something you can look in the Google, the famous startup Google. But what happens in the testing phase is that, again, we forget to test with the real users that we defined the idea with. So coming back to what Ida said before, the parking example. So it's kind of like, you think everything works well, it makes sense, but then you don't test with the real users, and then it might fail. Another good example that I like to bring is a shampoo effect. So we think that most of us have used shampoo at least once in our lives. How wrong can we go with a shampoo when we design it for kids? But if we don't test the idea with our real end users in their context, then this might happen. And the product is not being used. And I assume that most of us have felt this, like, this is designed so bad, you know, like it makes no sense to me, like why this is not good. The fact is, by some of the reports out there, that 66% of prototypes are not shared with the end users, the actual end users. And 50% of the product services that are being launched are, again, end users have not even been included into the process itself. So as I've mentioned before, I'm going to give you a couple of examples of innovation with the current situation, with the current context, where it's all about like not touching things. So some of the good examples that we already know that are out there would be contactless payment. So Apple Pay, all those wallets. It's not touching. It suits perfectly well into this current situation. And again, Amazon Go grocery. Basically they have used the design thinking and they're ready for these kinds of situations that have happened already. But there's 3 examples that I would like to highlight that have used when Corona kind of like started to hit the market, and how they used design thinking and came up with solutions. So one of these examples would be Google 𝗠𝗲, which is actually a new age framework, if you will, which is all about gestures. So it's a miniature radar that can understand human motions at various scales, from taps to whole body movements. And you can actually interact with services products without touching them. A second example would be an application that you don't actually interact with, but the application is actually helping you. It's listening how many times you cough, for example. How many times would you sneeze? How is your stress level? So you don't need to check and answer questionnaires, but it's following your kind of like everyday patterns and then notifying you when something might be wrong based on the big data, based on the AI that's happening currently on the market. And mental health is a huge topic currently. And again, there's a example from Massachusetts where a team kind of came up with this method of they explored from design thinking perspective what is happening with the end users. They were emphasizing with them, and they came up with the solution where we have these telemedicine conversations with our doctors or nurses, or even with our families. They can actually detect from the speech patterns if people are depressed without them saying, because a lot of people might not kind of acknowledge to themselves that I'm depressed, but from the speech patterns, they can see if a person might be down, because they can actually act in the right time. So from my side, the thing is to really go to use design thinking, emphasize, really test it out with the real users, and always, always, always stay curious.
Hey, thank you, Hannah. So, do we have any questions? Hanna is there looking at the chat. Are there any questions in the chat?
No questions.
Okay, so I guess we don't have any questions. Then thank you, and whenever you try to innovate, go and find out what your future end users are actually feeling, and where they are, and what they need in their life, and what is really important for them. And we will see you again next time. Thank you all for coming.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.